The Tokyo Dome was electric with anticipation on the night of December 30, 1992, as 55,000 fans packed into Japan's most prestigious venue for what would become one of the most talked-about concerts of Michael Jackson's Dangerous World Tour. Among the sea of faces in the arena was 19-year-old Akiko Tanaka, a university student from Osaka who had traveled 400 miles to Tokyo with her life savings converted into a single concert ticket. Akiko's story was one of quiet determination and profound personal struggle. Born into a traditional Japanese family where emotional expression was often discouraged and individual desires were subordinated to family expectations, she had discovered Michael Jackson's music during a particularly dark period of her teenage years. Her parents expected her to pursue a practical career in business or engineering, but Akiko's heart belonged to music, art, and the freedom of creative expression that seemed impossible within her cultural constraints. Michael Jackson's music had become her secret rebellion and her source of strength. In her small dormitory room at Osaka University, she would listen to Billie Jean, Beat It, and Black or White through headphones, feeling connected to a larger world where individuality was celebrated rather than suppressed. For Akiko, Michael Jackson represented the possibility of being true to yourself even when the world around you demanded conformity. The journey to Tokyo for the concert represented the most independent decision Akiko had ever made. She had told her parents she was visiting a study group, used her part-time job savings to buy the ticket and train fare, and prepared herself to experience something that her traditional upbringing had taught her was frivolous and inappropriate. But Akiko knew this might be her only opportunity to see her idol perform live, and she was willing to face her family's disapproval for this one night of personal freedom. Japanese concert culture in 1992 was notably different from the wild enthusiasm typical of American or European audiences. Japanese fans were respectful, orderly, and generally restrained in their expressions of appreciation. They clapped politely, cheered at appropriate moments, and maintained a level of decorum that reflected their cultural values of group harmony and consideration for others. But Michael Jackson's presence had a way of breaking down cultural barriers and inspiring people to express emotions they typically kept hidden. As the concert began with the explosive opening of "Wanna Be Startin' Something," even the reserved Japanese audience found themselves swept up in an energy that was impossible to resist. Akiko had positioned herself in the standing section, close enough to see Michael's facial expressions, but far enough back that she felt safely anonymous among the thousands of other fans. She had no intention of drawing attention to herself. She simply wanted to absorb every moment of the experience and carry it back to her constrained life in Osaka as a beautiful memory. For the first hour of the show, Akiko followed the lead of the Japanese fans around her, clapping enthusiastically but maintaining the respectful restraint that was expected in their culture. She sang along quietly in English, having memorized every word of Michael's songs despite never having had a conversation with a native English speaker in her life. But something was building inside Akiko as the concert progressed. Each song seemed to speak directly to her personal struggles with self-expression and authenticity. When Michael performed Black or White with its message about racial harmony and acceptance of differences, she felt tears streaming down her face. During Heal the World, his passionate delivery of the humanitarian message resonated with her own desire to make a positive difference in the world. The turning point came during She's Out of My Life, one of Michael's most emotionally vulnerable performances. As he sang about loss and regret, Akiko saw something in his stage presence that she had never noticed before. Despite being the most famous person in the world, Michael Jackson seemed profoundly lonely. His artistic brilliance had created a barrier between him and normal human connection, and in that moment, Akiko felt a deep empathy for the person behind the superstar persona. As the song reached its emotional climax, something inside Akiko broke open. All the years of suppressed emotion, all the feelings she had never been allowed to express, all the love and gratitude she felt for the artist who had given her strength during her darkest moments, suddenly demanded to be released. Without thinking about cultural appropriateness, family expectations, or the 55,000 people around her, Akiko did something that shocked even herself. She cupped her hands around her mouth and in clear, loud English screamed from the depths of her heart, "Michael, I love you!" The words cut through the ambient crowd noise with surprising clarity, reaching not just Michael Jackson on stage, but also the thousands of fans in her immediate vicinity who turned to see who had broken the unspoken rules of Japanese concert etiquette with such passionate intensity. But what happened next would create one of the most memorable and widely discussed moments in Michael Jackson concert history, establishing a new template for authentic artist-audience interaction that would influence live performances for decades to come. Michael Jackson's reaction to Akiko's declaration of love was immediate and unexpected. Instead of the typical wave and smile that performers usually give to crowd declarations, Michael stopped singing mid-phrase, walked directly to the edge of the stage closest to where the shout had originated, and stood silently for nearly 15 seconds while scanning the crowd with intense focus. The Tokyo Dome gradually fell quiet as 55,000 people realized that something unusual was happening. Michael raised his hand to signal the band to stop playing, and in the sudden silence, he spoke into his microphone with a gentleness that was audible throughout the massive venue. "Someone just told me they love me. Where are you, sweetheart?" Akiko felt every eye in her section turning toward her as the fans who had witnessed her outburst pointed in her direction. Her face burned with embarrassment, but she managed to raise her hand tentatively above her head. Michael's eyes found her immediately, and he smiled with genuine warmth before asking a question that would become legendary in concert history. "Thank you for saying that, but I have a question for you," Michael said, his voice carrying clearly through the sound system. "You say you love me, but do you love yourself?" The question hung in the air like a challenge and an invitation simultaneously. It wasn't what anyone expected to hear at a pop concert, least of all Akiko, who found herself confronted with the most difficult question she had ever been asked in the most public setting imaginable. The silence in the Tokyo Dome was profound. 55,000 people waited for an answer to a question that most of them had never seriously considered about themselves. Michael Jackson stood patiently on stage, giving Akiko time to process the unexpected turn their interaction had taken. When Akiko finally responded, her voice was barely audible, but the arena sound system picked up her whispered "I don't know" and carried it throughout the venue. Her honesty was so raw and vulnerable that it created an immediate emotional connection with everyone present who had ever struggled with self-acceptance and personal worth. Michael's response was swift and powerful. "Then that's your homework. You can't truly love anyone else until you learn to love the beautiful person you already are." He paused, then continued with increasing passion. "Ladies and gentlemen, this young woman just reminded me of something very important. We live in a world that teaches us to love celebrities, love music, love everything except ourselves. But real love starts here," he pointed to his heart, "with accepting who you are." Then Michael did something unprecedented in his concert career. He sat down cross-legged on the stage, motioned for the audience to sit down as well, and began what amounted to an impromptu therapy session with 55,000 participants. "How many of you struggle with loving yourselves?" he asked. Hands began going up throughout the arena, tentatively at first, then with increasing confidence as people realized they weren't alone in their struggles with self-acceptance. "I see all those hands," Michael said, his voice now carrying the weight of genuine emotion. "I want you to know that I struggle with it too. Fame doesn't cure loneliness. Success doesn't cure self-doubt. Money doesn't cure the need to feel worthy of love." The admission was stunning. Michael Jackson, at the height of his global fame and influence, was revealing personal vulnerabilities to thousands of strangers in a way that no major celebrity had ever done before. The honesty was so unexpected and powerful that people throughout the arena began crying, not from excitement, but from recognition of their shared humanity with someone they had viewed as superhuman. Michael continued, "Akiko, that's your name, right?" She nodded from her position in the crowd. "Akiko just taught all of us something beautiful. She had the courage to express love out loud even though it made her vulnerable. That's what real strength looks like." He stood up and made an announcement that would be remembered as one of the most spontaneous and meaningful gestures in concert history. "Tonight, instead of me performing for you, we're all going to practice loving ourselves together." What followed was unlike anything that had ever happened at a major concert. Michael led the entire Tokyo Dome in what he called a self-love meditation, asking everyone to put their hands on their hearts and repeat affirmations about their own worth and beauty. The sight of 55,000 people participating in this collective act of self-acceptance was profoundly moving and represented a complete transformation of what a pop concert could be. The session lasted nearly 20 minutes, during which Michael shared personal stories about his own struggles with self-acceptance, the pressure of fame, and his journey toward understanding that his worth as a person wasn't dependent on his achievements as a performer. He spoke about childhood experiences, family dynamics, and the loneliness that came with global celebrity status. When the formal concert resumed, the energy in the Tokyo Dome had been completely transformed. The audience wasn't just watching a performance, they were participating in a shared experience of vulnerability, authenticity, and mutual support. Michael's subsequent songs were delivered with an emotional intensity that reflected